Now, imagine driving alone or with friends through a quiet, shadowed canyon, the kind of place where even the wind seems alive. You've been on these roads before, so it feels familiar. Until something impossible steps out of the darkness, something so massive it makes your heart stop, your hands shake, and your mind question everything you thought you knew about the world. That's exactly what happened, at least according to the reports, at a place called Sycamore Flats Campground, tucked away in Big Rock Canyon of the San Gabriel Mountains, just outside Los Angeles. It was either 1977 or maybe 1971, depending on which version of the story you follow, and it would become the site of an encounter that has haunted multiple witnesses for decades. A creature was seen, one that defied all logic, one that may have been as tall as 15 and a half feet. Its arms were long and powerful, its feet enormous, its strides so large it brushed 12-foot-high tree branches while running. And yet, what's truly fascinating and maddening is that no one can agree on exactly when or where it happened. So join me as we explore the giant of Sycamore Flat. The story, as it's often told, begins with Staff Sergeant Fred Wilson and two of his fellow military companions driving through the campgrounds of Sycamore Flat. The men were experienced, military trained, disciplined, and used to assessing threats, but nothing in their training could have prepared them for this. In the brush, standing almost motionless, was a humanoid figure of extraordinary size. Eyewitness accounts described it as covered in tan-colored hair, lacking a visible neck, giving its head an oddly oblong, elongated appearance with a flat nose and large, pronounced canine teeth. The men initially thought it was just a wild animal, perhaps, something strange maybe, but instinct kicked in, and in hindsight, it was a critical mistake. They fired their weapons at it. The creature's reaction was instantaneous. It didn't retreat. It didn't hesitate. It exploded from the foliage, flailing its massive hairy arms as it surged toward the truck. Witnesses describe a terrifying 20-second chase, the men speeding down the narrow canyon roads, the creature keeping pace, easily covering ground with every monstrous stride. And then just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature veered sharply into a side canyon. Its head brushed against a tree branch over 12 feet above that road as it disappeared into the shadows. No sound, no trace except the prints it left behind. Once the men returned to civilization, they reported the encounter to the Lancaster Sheriff's Office. They went back to the site with law enforcement and made a startling discovery: large footprints unlike anything they had ever seen. These weren't typical Bigfoot tracks. They weren't five-toed. These were three-toed footprints, some stretching nearly 2 feet long. Plaster casts were reportedly taken, and soon Bigfoot researchers descended on the area, eager to analyze them. One investigator, Margaret Bailey, later claimed to see an enormous humanoid figure under the moonlight in the same location. Nearby at South Fork Campground, 21-inch tracks were discovered, suggesting a creature with a 12-foot-long stride, an absolute giant even among reported Bigfoot sightings. What makes Sycamore Flat even more intriguing is the history of unexplained phenomena in the area. Researcher Josh Troy noted UFO sightings hovering above the canyon, strange mechanical or metallic sounds seemingly coming from underground, an atmosphere that locals described as unnervingly alive, almost sentient. If this seems familiar, it's because it's reminiscent of Skinwalker Ranch, decades before it became famous. Could this creature be connected to something far stranger than Bigfoot? Or is it simply a coincidence that a remote canyon with high paranormal activity also hosted one of the tallest humanoids ever reported? Now, here's where the story gets truly confusing. The original source cited for the 1977 Sycamore Flats report was in the Great Falls Tribune, a Montana newspaper. In Montana, there's an almost identical account of a humanoid encounter, supposedly taking place in Belt Creek Canyon, Montana. Same creature, same chase, same high tree branch encounter. But the key differences exist. No Fred Wilson, no named witnesses, far fewer details overall. It raises the question, did the California encounter somehow get reported in Montana? Or are we looking at two separate but eerily similar incidences, later conflated in retellings? According to the Sasquatch Chronicles website, the earliest witnesses may have been Brian Goldajarb, Richard Ingalls, and William Willie Wammerman, three teenagers camping in Big Rock Canyon in California, 1971, 6 years before the alleged Fred Wilson sighting. Later, Wammerman became a police officer in Palmdale, California, and recounted revisiting the site years later, describing overwhelming discomfort and an urge to leave immediately. In this account, the creature stood 12 feet tall. It chased their vehicle for a short distance, then veered into a canyon, brushing under a 12-foot-high tree branch. Notice anything familiar? It's nearly identical to the 1977 story. This is where the narrative starts bending in on itself. Could the 1977 Fred Wilson story actually be misdated or misattributed retelling of the 1971 California encounter? Or are we looking at three separate incidences now? So, what exactly was this thing? Well, let's break it down, since I've got two theories. Theory 1, it was a very rare, extremely large Bigfoot. Very astronomical in comparison to other Bigfoot sightings. A 7-9-foot creature would already be exceptional. Don't get me wrong, but a creature 11-15 feet tall? Like I said, astronomical, but not impossible. Just as humans vary from 5 to 8 feet, perhaps an ancient hominid population had similar outliers. Given the timing shortly after the Patterson-Gimlin film, these could have been the last remnants of a dying species. Theory 2. A true giant. Descriptions of the creatures deviate from classic Sasquatch. Lanky, long-limbed bodies, odd walking pattern, 3 to 4-toed footprints. Some researchers categorize such beings as true giants, feral humanoids, perhaps a degenerate Neanderthal strain, more human than ape, yet monstrous in scale. If true, this creature was something humanity has rarely, if ever, documented. It just happens to show up as a blip in cryptozoological history. Now let's talk about timing and location. The Montana and California accounts may have been separate events that merged in later reporting. The similarities are remarkable, yes, but parallel occurrences of similar phenomena aren't impossible. Separating them allows each story, California 1971 and Montana 77, to exist independently, making more sense of the conflicting witness details. Although despite the three different cases, I'm leaning toward the Romerman, Ingalls, and Goldajarb account, the original witnesses. I believe Fred Wilson and his soldiers was a later retelling, misdated. The Montana newspaper citation, a reporting error, or perhaps a secondary story that copied details. And in fact, that I couldn't find the Great Falls Tribune article on August 20th, 1977, the exact date that the article should have been published. Couldn't find it. I even did a 30-day trial for the Great Tribune on newspapers, I think, .com. And I could not find, even within that month span. And yes, I went through every single newspaper of August 1977 in order to see maybe if it would appear, but I could not find it. But this whole situation, it adds another layer of the mystery. Wrong paper, wrong date, or something deliberately obscured maybe, perhaps. We'll never know, I suppose. Regardless of which version you choose to believe, some details remain consistent. Multiple witnesses, massive humanoid proportions, a chase that defies normal animal behavior, for footprints that cannot be explained by any known species. It suggests a creature, whether Bigfoot or a true giant, far beyond ordinary human understanding. And when we add the paranormal context of Sycamore Flats, UFOs, underground mechanical noises, and high strangeness phenomena, it hints at something far more complex, and possibly more intelligent than just a wild ape in the forest. In conclusion, the giant of Sycamore Flat, or Bell Creek Canyon, depending on which story you decide to trust, remains one of the most fascinating, confusing, and terrifying humanoid sightings in modern history, arguably. It's a story of uncertainty, fear, and limits of human perception. One thing we can be sure of, though, something massive was out there that night, It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't someone's imagination. It was a giant. One that, for whatever reason, didn't want to be seen, yet left footprints that screamed its existence for anyone bold enough to look. And that's why, decades later, we're still talking about it, and why I decided to make a video about it. Because the world may contain beings far older, far stronger, and far taller than we could ever imagine. And maybe, just maybe, one of them still walks in the shadows of Sycamore Flats to this day. And with that said, thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you later.